Good morning, Community Roundtable members. My name is Nancy McCurra, Port Coquitlam City Councillor, and I am so proud to be the Port Coquitlam Council Designate for this Committee Roundtable. It is my pleasure to be your MC today, and I wish to begin by acknowledging that this meeting is taking place on the shared traditional territories of the Coast Salish Nations. We welcome you to put in the chat who you are and where you are joining us from. Thank you for coming and welcome to the Coquitlam River Watershed Roundtable webinar, Fire Prevention in Urban Forests. As climate continues to rapidly alter what we know as normal, this event is brought to you on the tail end of a historic fire season. We are here today to learn how we can better manage our urban forests and the properties we live on to help reduce the risk of wildfire in the watershed. We will talk about how forest management is changing as our knowledge evolves and what you can do around your home to keep the watershed safe. After guest speakers, you will have the opportunity to ask questions and tell the roundtable how to focus its activities for the upcoming year in our community input poll. I'm just going to pause for a moment. I'm going to check to see if we have any winners yet. We do. All right. So the winners are Pamela Zavet, Eric Morden, Paul Lambert, and Tyler, no last name, from the city of Coquitlam. Well done. So the coordinator will contact you with information on how to collect your prize. So before we get started, I would like to introduce to you our event panelists, all of whom are core committee members. Our facilitator is Kirsten Wilson from Jack Seaweed Construction. Our moderator is Scott Wamsley from the city of Port Coquitlam. And our meeting chair is Susan Devlin from Van City. Our roundtable would also like to acknowledge our local representatives who are participating this afternoon. Welcome, Mayor Stewart, City of Coquitlam, Councillor Terry Towner, and Councillor Steve Kim from the City of Coquitlam. Councillor Kim is also a core committee member. We thank you for taking time to join us today, and we hope you enjoy the event. Our speakers today are Richard Boase of the District of North Vancouver and Captain Chad Evans with the Port Coquitlam Fire Department. Mr. Boase will be speaking to us about how urban forest management practices are and will be followed by Captain Evans, who will be talking about how to reduce the risk of wildfire around your home. A Q&A session will follow their presentation. Please be sure to use the Q&A function, not the chat. Questions will be answered in the order they are received. And with that, I would like to introduce Richard Boase. Mr. Boase is a BC registered professional geoscientist and qualified environmental professional. He has over 27 years of local government experience with the District of North Vancouver, a recognized leader and specialist in urban watersheds. He has been working on forest health and wildfire prevention with the District of North Vancouver since 2007. Go ahead, Richard.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to get going here. While my screen share starts up, hopefully we're good now. And I'd like to thank members of the Coquitlam Watershed Roundtable for getting in touch with me and giving me an opportunity to share some of the information that we've been working on here in North Van for probably quite a while. So I'm going to go quite quickly here. Because the idea is to get through the material because the value is all in the questions that I'm sure everyone's going to have at the end here. So Okay, there we go. So the district implemented and adopted our very first community wildfire protection plan in 2007. And since that time, we have undertaken numerous efforts to continuing to improve on our wildfire resilience and safety of our interface community areas as they relate to the surrounding forest, which includes treatment of, I think, probably almost hundreds of hectares of interface forest for fuel treatment, policy, critical infrastructure, safety work, and all of that. So we've been very busy, and we continue to work on continuously adapting our program. So one of the important messages I want to deliver today is as we're moving forward, it is really important that we integrate our forest health and our forest management with our other corporate and community strategic plans. Because as we're facing sort of an uncertain future with climate change, we need to be thinking across many, many fronts. So what I'm showing here is, this is a summary of the district's council adopted climate adaptation strategy. We completed this strategy in 2017. Council had a look at it and adopted this plan. And you know, the bullets show and highlight some of the issues that we're going to be facing going into the future. But what our climate change strategy also did is identified a number of key action items to help us combat, mitigate, and face the future of climate change as it relates to the district. And I thought I would share a couple of these action objectives. Sorry for the small text and that, but so action objective 5, support the long-term health of natural forest ecosystems. And I can't emphasize how important, if you get a message from me today, that message is that healthy biodiverse forests in our interface area have shown and have proven to be fire resistant. So it's really important that we recognize that, and we integrate collaborative work relationships with our fire department, with our stakeholders in our community, and our homeowners to adopt a natural biodiverse forest management strategy for these interface areas. The next objective is manage invasive plants. So we have known that without control, invasive plants can populate our interface areas in particular, and there's many invasive plants that actually increase fire hazards. Many of you know there's a plant, Scotch broom, which is incredibly flammable as an invasive plant. So, you know, our plan recognizes we need to manage our invasive plants to promote fire safety. Restore and protect our existing native biodiversity areas. Again, focusing on natural and biodiverse forest areas to improve fire safety for our community. The other part is, you know, there's other ecologically sensitive areas associated with our interface areas, not just forest, right? So we need to recognize our ecologically sensitive areas and put plans in place for how we're going to keep and create those areas natural, because, for example, wetlands just by their nature are going to be fire resistant. So it's important to recognize those areas and continue to promote restoration and protection of these areas. So this is just a quick picture of some of our wildfire hazard mapping area. So we've developed policy that identifies areas of our community residential area that are at risk of wildfire. So the darker brown areas around the outside, these are our interface areas. The lighter brown we've identified as wildfire risk areas. And so we've established policy around this, and our policy requires Firesmart materials to be used in every new home that's built in any of these orange areas here. So as of last count, we've effected Firesmart improvements on hundreds and hundreds of homes within this area, which is part of building a fire-resistant community. And again, this was as of 2007, we treated 72 hectares of fuel area. So now we're going to get into sort of the guts of the issue of why this is really important. So here is a picture of a fire started adjacent to a house. The fire was started by a barbecue, and there was significant damage to the house. You can see the house siding, the wood siding on the side right there in the foreground of the picture was badly damaged. The interesting thing to note is you can see some mature conifer cedar trees in the main part of the picture. And while these trees were impacted and scorched, it's important to know that healthy and mature conifers are fire resistive and can be part of a biodiverse program to help increase our forest health, but also protect homes from fire and fire impact. So that's important. Here's another picture that shows a fire that you can see it right in behind the plastic greenhouse is the garage, and that's where the fire started. And that garage structure was completely decimated and destroyed by fire. The large house you can see in the background there, while it sustained fairly significant damage and water damage, you can see the siding, the roof materials, and I'm sure my colleague with the Coquitlam Fire Department is going to talk about the importance of fire-resistant materials used in our homes and stuff. That house we can see in the background had fire-resistive roofing materials and siding, and we can see how that material prevented much more serious damage to this home caught with the fire in the garage right next door. So again, very important. Policy allows you to implement that kind of material guidelines. So it's important we get policy. So what does biodiverse and natural forest management look like in terms of fire treatment? So here's some pictures of an area on the left, pre-treatment, to the area picture on the right, which is the exact same area, which is after our fuel treatment. So one of the things you can notice is the light. So it's really important when we do wildfire interface management to open the canopy up, because in opening the canopy up, what we're doing is we're reducing the stems per hectare count. You can see on the picture on the left, many small little stick trees and ladder fuels that are available. So when we do a prescription, we go in and we remove all of those ladder fuels. We open the canopy up to allow light, and then we plant native materials. Specifically in this area, we focused on a lot of shrub material, right? The other thing you'll notice that is part of our program is now we leave much of the down stems as coarse woody debris in the forest. We found this is not a risk to fire hazard. It's good for biodiversity and the ecology in the areas. It provides soil nutrients, and it also, these logs, as they decay, they have great capacity at absorbing water. So very important. So here's another look at one of our treatment areas. You can see the area on the left is just immediately after the treatment. So again, the same theme. We've opened the canopy up, we've reduced the stems per hectare, and now you can see the pictures on the right, the arrow that's sort of pointing from the big stump from the right, pointing to that same stump on the left. You can see the ferns and the native understory that's now starting to grow and populate this areas. We can see the picture down below. You can see the tall stump with the arrow, sort of the tall stump on the right side pointing up. And you can see the shrub layer development and the really rich shrub biodiversity growth that we are really trying to encourage in these interface areas. So fire resistivity in this interface area is really about moisture. So the more shrubs, woody debris, and native biodiversity we encourage along the forest floor, the more moisture we're going to retain, which is helpful for our interface fire areas. So I know it's just a snippet. I probably went pretty quick, but I think I managed my time effectively, and I'll look forward to all the questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boase. Any questions for Mr. Boase will be addressed after our next speaker, Captain Chad Evans from the Port Coquitlam Fire Department. Chad Evans is a captain with the Port Coquitlam Fire and Emergency Services. He got hired as a firefighter in 2004, and in 2017, changed divisions within the department and moved into fire prevention as the department public educator. His role now includes teaching the public on what they can do to keep them and their families safe, as well as fire inspections of local businesses and fire investigations. Go ahead, Captain Evans. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. I appreciate that. And thanks for everyone for having me speak to you on something that I think is becoming more, it's always been important, but I think over the last few years it's become more maybe of a focal point with all the wildfires we've been having within the province lately. And just give me 1 second here while I share my screen. Okay, sorry guys. Okay, so, and what we'll talk about today is some measures that we can take around our homes to prevent a wildfire from having a big impact on it. So wildfires are a natural part of kind of our wildland ecosystem. But because of this, it presents a hazard to our communities and neighborhoods. And this can't be solved. This wildland urban interface fire hazard and problem can't be solved with more firefighters, because due to the extent of the fire and the incident, it's just going to be overwhelming for our local fire departments to handle. So we all kind of have to do our part. And by taking some preventative actions and being proactive on taking some steps around our home and our community, we can kind of prevent that hazard and that fire from happening. So what is a wildland urban interface? So basically, it's any developed area where the combination of human development and vegetation have the potential to result in a negative impact from wildfire on the neighborhood. So essentially, it's kind of that zone of where we have forest and trees and wildland next to an urban development. So homes, buildings, and infrastructure. And a wildland urban interface fire is when that fire transitions from the forest into our developed area. And when we think of wildland urban interfaces and wildland urban interface fires, I think sometimes we think about areas like northern BC and the interior and the Okanagan, where there's large forests and there's kind of homes sporadically spaced out into these woods. And we might think of like cabins and cottages, but right here in our own communities, we have this wildland urban interface. So a wildland urban interface doesn't come with the size or amount of trees or anything like that. It can be anywhere where there's that potential for a wildfire to spread to our homes. So where I am in Port Coquitlam, we have areas like Gates Park, where the watershed does run through. And we also have areas like Hyde Creek, where they may be kind of relatively small when we think of a forest, but it's still a forested area. And with Hyde Creek, there's about 500, 800 homes that surround that area that could be impacted by a wildfire. In areas, if you're from Coquitlam, areas like around Mundy Park, and even North Burke Mountain, that's developed quite a bit over the last few years, kind of present that wildfire hazard. And then Port Moody, maybe Burt Flynn Park, and even northern Port Moody on Heritage Mountain. So you can see where there's forest in all these pictures, but where the homes are kind of creeping up right onto that edge of the forest. That's our wildland urban interface. And so this risk of fire can kind of happen in a couple of different ways. So a wildfire starts either from natural causes like lightning or from human causes. So in my 1617 years of being in the fire department, I've probably gone to maybe two fires started by lightning, but I've gone to dozens and dozens of fires started by either discarded cigarettes or campfires or illegal camping or barbecues. So even with last year's wildfire, which may have been considered a slower year for wildfires, with only 670 so fires in the province, 59% of those were caused by humans. And I think that stat is consistent throughout all the years, where most of these wildfires are started by human causes. But the thing with that is those types of fires can be prevented. So we can take actions by preventing the fire from happening in the first place, and then we can take actions by protecting our homes. And we can, if we understand how a wildfire works and spreads, we can kind of take these steps. We can understand the steps a little bit better on how to protect our homes. So wildfire can spread from a few different ways. So the first way it can spread is just from the extreme heat or the radiant heat of the fire. So this is kind of the heat that we feel either from the sun or maybe from a space heater. This is just the energy of the heat that's being transferred through radio waves through the air onto the structure. It can also be spread through direct heat, where there's flame to flame contact on the structure from the fire to the building. And probably the most common way wildfire spreads is through sparks and embers. So over 50% of homes catch on fire due to falling embers from the forest fire. So if you think of having a campfire and we get these embers that'll float and kind of float up and burn, the wildfire does the same thing, but times 1,000 just due to the fuel load. And the thing with these flying embers or these sparks is that they can travel up to 2 kilometers. And it's these embers that cause most of the damage and fires to our homes. So to prevent this, we can kind of take a couple of steps. And if we think of our home in zones, and the most important zone or dangerous zone or hazardous zone is the area right around our home. So from the roof down and then about 1.5 meters away from the house. So we call this the non-combustible zone. And then how a wildfire kind of spreads to a house is sometimes when we think of a wildfire, we think of it almost as moving quickly and causing this path of destruction, almost like an avalanche. But whether it's a wildfire or any type of fire, in order for the fire to spread, it has to have something to burn. It needs combustible fuel. So it'll only spread if there's something to ignite. So if we can remove the material to ignite, then we can prevent that wildfire from spreading. So when we take that concept and think about the area right around our home, we can do things like cleaning our roof of loose pine needles and dry leaves. We can, if we remove this from our home and from the roof, it will prevent that wildfire from spreading. So fire kind of needs 3 things to burn. It needs to have fuel, it needs to have oxygen, and it needs to have enough heat to burn. So in the case of a wildfire, our home, the way it's constructed in the buildings, it provides the fuel, the combustible fuel, but the flames itself aren't hot enough. They're hot enough, but they're not, the heat's not exposed to the structure long enough in order for it to catch fire. However, it is, the pine needles and the leaves do burn a lot easier and ignite easier. So it's when this material catches on fire that fire spreads to our homes. So if we can remove this from our roofs and from our gutters, if we can close off the eaves in our house, stopping from any sparks and embers from going in, if we can move wood piles from against our house, and dry leaves and needles from on top of the deck or underneath our patios, what we're trying to do is limit or take away any of this easily combustible fuel. And because again, it's when this material catches on fire, it's that fire that can then spread to our homes. And like Richard was saying, vegetation is a very big part of it as well. So from around our homes, if we can remove plants like cedar trees and cedar bushes and bark mulch from right up against our home, we can prevent that fire from spreading. And the types of plants we plant have an effect as well. So if we are using landscaping around our home, we want to make sure that we're using plants that are less combustible, that are moist, don't drop a lot of dead leaves and materials. And that information can be found in the Firesmart BC Landscaping Guide. And this website here, firesmartbc.ca, has a lot of great information on just kind of simple steps we can do to protect our homes. And things like cleaning out the gutters, removing dry, dead debris from our roofs are things that we can do right away that take a little bit of effort and a little bit of time, but something we can do right now to make a difference. And then we can think about bigger projects like replacing the roof, replacing the siding on our homes with non-composite side or with composite siding and stuff like that when the time comes. But right now we can take these simple steps to protect our homes. So thank you guys, I appreciate that. I know it's pretty quick, but hopefully there's lots of questions and I'll be happy to answer any of them. And then part of our program in Port Coquitlam, along with the city of Coquitlam and the villages of Anmore and Belcarra, is our Northeast Sector Firesmart program. So this is a program that just started this year with a grant that our communities received from the UBCM and Firesmart BC. And the Firesmart coordinator for this program is Tamara Myers, who has a team of Firesmart employees and workers that are going around the community to talk about what we just talked about here, ways to prevent our homes, prevent a wildfire from spreading to our homes. So I'll let Tamara come on now if she likes.
Thanks, Chad. Hi, everybody. So I'm just going to be quick and share a little bit more info about the grant that was received. So the program is funded by a joint provincial Firesmart Economic Recovery Fund that was received by Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam, Belcarra, and Anmore. And the main purpose of this grant was to create jobs and as well improve wildfire resiliency through the property assessments, public outreach, and infrastructure improvements. So a large part of this has been our 4 Firesmart ambassadors that we have out going door to door right now in the 4 communities. And they're focusing right now on reaching 5,000 houses. And these houses have been identified as being in the wildfire urban interface, so areas that back onto forested areas. And they're knocking on doors and letting people know that they're eligible to receive a free Firesmart house assessment by our Firesmart representative, who was also hired through the city of Coquitlam. So we have a web page. It's northeastsector.ca. You can go to this website for more information. You can also go to the website to fill out our form to receive the assessment. At this time, we're only doing our identified areas, so our areas that are in high risk. So you go to the website and you'll see a map, and your house may have a red dot on it, and that would mean that you're eligible for the free assessment. And then we'll have our representative come out and do some assessments of the houses, and homeowners are not obligated to proceed any further with any of the recommendations that the representative makes. However, there is funding available for seniors 65 and over who wish to complete some of the recommendations, and they can get some of the costs of labor reimbursed. As well, the grant has allowed the Sasamat Fire Hall and Sasamat Works Yard to receive some Firesmart assessments. And then they're using those recommendations and some of the grant money to make facility upgrades. So I believe one of them was replacing the roof on the works yard and possibly the fire hall. So, so far, we will have our Firesmart ambassadors door knocking for about 4 months, so into December. And then we'll have our Firesmart representative doing assessments out until, I believe, March. And yeah, that's just a quick overview of our new program. And if there's any questions at the end, we'd be happy to answer them.
Well, thank you very much, Captain Evans and Tamara, and to all of our speakers for their informative presentations, as well to Mr. Boase. If you have not already done so, please add your questions via the Q&A function in your menu tray. Just a reminder that the chat box will not be monitored for questions. I'll now hand it over to our facilitator, Kirsten Wilson.
Thank you, Councillor McCurra. That's great, thank you. So we have a couple questions here in the question and answer chat here, and I'm thinking, Sherry, should I just read them out? And Richard, these are addressed to you. So I'll just read this out for the group, and then Richard, if you have a chance to answer, I see you were typing as well. So we'll just go through that again. So this question is from Julia, and it's asking, what is your protocol when you find and or are aware of areas in North Vancouver with endangered species present? I would assume that you would not do any fuel treatment in those areas. Are you working with a registered biologist to identify endangered species locations prior to the commencement of any fuel treatment work? And that's Julia, I'm going to say Lachi, and she looks like she's a biologist as well. So Richard, do you want to just answer?
Sure. Thanks, Julia. Good question. And, you know, the short answer is absolutely. We require RP Bios to conduct an ecological assessment in any of our proposed fuel treatment areas. We do that for a couple of reasons. So the first is an internal reason is all of our air interface fuel areas are not just part of our wildfire protection development permit areas. They're also part of either our streamside protection or our natural environment protection development permit areas. So we have to ensure a proper review of both those policies as well as the guidelines associated with wildfire protection. So we don't do our fuel prescription work independently. It's a collaborative effort. And the second reason we do this is we have been incredibly successful with grants from UBCM for fuel treatment prescription work. And in order to be successful with this grant program, the province is looking very carefully at our prescriptions. So we must include RP Bio assessments on all of our proposed prescription and treatment areas. And that includes species at risk assessments and safety and prevention protocol for not just species at risk, but the other wildlife that might be living in these areas. So whether it's, we've conducted frog salvage in one of our areas in a little wetland around the area. It's whether it's protection of small vole or mammal habitat, all of that, we've encountered all of that in our fuel prescription work. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, thank you, Richard, for that. And we have another question here from Pamela Zevid. And she says, related to Julia's question, how do we ensure a balanced approach is taken, reinforcing the message that an intact, healthy, structural, diverse urban forest is an asset in fire prevention? Where am I here, Crowley? It is needed to address public perceptions that all natural areas are going to catch fire, resulting in pressure on local governments to clear these areas, or dealing with residents who go overboard with fuel management and end up cleaning adjacent parkland out of fear of fire risk. So this may be to both of you, Richard.
So it's a difficult question, especially in light of events, you know, that everyone experienced this past summer. But the only way around this is through a collaborative outreach effort. And so as an example of what we have done is we have partnered with our fire services group, and our fire services group is now offering on-lot Firesmart inspection type services, where you can sign up and have someone from our fire services go to your property, and they will advise you on ideas on making your home more fire smart, right? So we have met with our fire department. We've talked about the combined benefits of you know, retaining native understory type vegetation and to promote soil moisture retention and things like that. And so the fire department is on board with that message. So they're helping us to deliver it. The other thing we've been fortunate enough in the district is our wildfire development permit area. So as I mentioned, we've processed hundreds of these development permits. So every time we have an opportunity to interact with the homeowner, we're continuing to spread this message around how going through this process, their home will now be up to a very fire resistive standard. And so again, it's an ongoing issue. So it's a collaborative outreach effort that includes, you know, media stuff, website material. But what we found really effective is the fire department putting boots on the ground and taking up the offer to go and meet with residents on their property.
Okay, great. And hopefully that answers your question. And this is to Tamara from Ann Woosnam. Many multi-residents, i.e. condos, are next to green belts. Can they get assessments?
Yeah, so we're working with, sorry, could she confirm if you're talking about strata or just like condo buildings?
Okay, well, I will wait for Anne to get, I think she's saying condo. I may be multi-resident, well, not sure actually. So we'll see if she can clarify that for us. I have a question here, so we'll wait on that. We have a question here from Michael. And he is saying, this is probably to you, Chad, our house backs on to a conservation area that's almost all cottonwood and just one cedar just 50 feet away. How does this minimize our fire risk? Oh, sorry, this would probably be to you, Richard, as well.
So yeah, good question. And like Richard mentioned, some trees are more susceptible to fire and igniting than others. But a couple of things we can do. One, we can do things like trying to prevent a fire from happening in the first place. So especially in kind of like our Tri-Cities area, and maybe most kind of municipal areas that have these small pockets of forest, there's a lot of human use in them with trails and hikes and walks and stuff in them. So while we're using these trails, if we can, in these areas, if we can do things like not smoking in them, not having illegal campfires in them, so we can do things while in those trails to prevent a fire. And then from there, we can do things around our home to, if a fire does start, we can do things around our home, like we talked about, to stop that fire from spreading from the forest to our homes. And then Richard might have a better idea on kind of the combustibility or flammability of cottonwoods and how they spread, maybe.
Well, generally, you're going to find cottonwoods in your sort of floodplain riparian areas, next to areas where there's a lot of access to moisture in the soil. So, you know, I can't comment very specifically on those trees. We don't have a lot of cottonwood trees in areas immediately adjacent to our homes. Again, the cottonwood trees are mostly in the lower riparian floodplain valleys. So, but what I will do is I'll say that, you know, processing hundreds of these private property developments and reviews, we've kind of come to this philosophy where the forestry consultants that are required to submit a homeowner's wildfire protection plan, they like to produce what they're calling a 10-meter defensible space zone around the home. And that's an area where they like to basically remove the trees if they can, remove ladder fuels, and really reduce the risk of mainly of a fire that starts in the home spreading to the forest, right? But you know, in the district, and I'm sure when looking at some of the maps that were shown in some of the earlier presentations, much of the interface area is owned by the municipality, the provincial park, and all of that. So we take a very close look at that 10-meter defensible space prescription. So, for example, if the homeowner's property only has 5 meters of land on private property, and so they're looking to create 10 meters, that would include a 5-meter prescription on district land. So we take a very, very close look at that, and we're going to not allow that prescription to wholesale remove healthy, mature conifer trees, especially if they're healthy fir and cedars, which we know are fairly naturally fire resistant. But for example, if that district forest that's part of this 10-meter zone area has a lot of unhealthy monoculture hemlock stands and is generally not healthy, we'll use the policy and the wildfire prescription to allow work on district land to remove fuel, but there also comes with a replanting program and a native understory shrub program and all of that. So we're kind of working towards blending, you know, fire resistivity with increasing or preserving biodiversity in our forest next door.
Okay, thank you. And how are we doing for time here? We're still good. Susan, we're good. Yeah. So.
Yeah, we have 8 minutes left.
Okay, good. This is from Steve. For areas that were treated in the District of North Vancouver, do you imagine that at some point you will have to do another entry treatment? How long after the initial treatment? Richard.
A good question. We have done some monitoring of some of our treatment areas, which, like I said, are, you know, they're coming up on 15 years. So ideally, we will not have to go back to these areas for doing any work. The whole idea behind our prescriptions and the way we've modified our prescription work is to basically act as a catalyst to bring that forest area into this primordial old growth equilibrium where the cedar and fir stands are at the right spacing. There's rich, lush understory, right? We've all seen these areas where, you know, there's salal and Oregon grape and huckleberry that's sort of 5 and 6 feet high. That's what we're trying to achieve in these areas, because we know that if we can get there, that forest will be safe, it'll be biodiverse, and ideally we won't need to go back there. So when we do a prescription, our aim is to not have to go back there and do it. But we do keep a little eye on it and stuff. But you know, the recent summer is very interesting. We're in literally unprecedented times, you know, with the looper moth outbreak and the heat dome. So we don't know what to expect, but we're now planning on possibly looking at some proactive silviculture of actually going into some of these forests, which we know are unhealthy as a result of past logging activity, and seeing what we can do to stimulate their quicker movement towards a more natural equilibrium.
Okay, and force of nature, I believe this is for you, Chad. I noticed the northeast sector Firesmart program map that homes bordering on Lower Coquitlam River Park were not marked for this program. These homes would be in Coquitlam, but homes in Port Coquitlam were similar. Well, maybe not for you actually, Chad, but you'll have an opinion on this. But homes in Port Coquitlam with similar proximity to Coquitlam River were marked on the map. Were the homes assigned by each municipality separately, or was there a different reason to miss the Lower Coquitlam River Park?
I can talk on this just a little bit. So each municipality picked their own kind of the areas of a concern that they thought. So look, I'd have to look at the map to see exactly where you're talking about. I don't think I highly doubt it is intentionally missed. I'm sure there is a reason why that area wasn't on there. However, and Tamara might be able to speak to this a little bit more. Just because your map or your home isn't on there, one way or another, we can still do an inspection for you. I'm sure.
Tamara, do you have anything to add to that?
No, we're hoping that if we get through all of our 5,000 houses as of now, that we can add some at the end. So that might be like an area that we'd look at adding if we have time. But yeah, like Chad said, there's certain parameters that each area used. And that's just depending on like a certain area of forest or meters away from things. So that's just kind of how the dots got put on there. But it's always something we can look at in the future, adding on.
Yeah, that's right, Tamara. So when the map was made, there are certain parameters like homes that were within 30 meters of the edge of a forest. So while your home or those homes in your area may be relatively close, they might have not met that 30 meters. And the reason they picked 30 meters is because like in that we were talking about fire spread and radiant heat, studies have shown just through past fires that homes that are past that, 30 meters, homes that are past that 30 meters are unlikely or there's less chance for them to catch on fire due to radiant heat. So that's where those parameters kind of came from. Not that it's still not a risk, but again, you could do things in your area with your neighbors to prevent any fire in there from spreading to your homes, like removing any combustible materials from as far away as possible as your home and removing the dried needles, leaves, and that kind of stuff.
Okay, and just going back to Anne's question about multi-residences, and this is for you, Tamara, can they get an assessment? I believe Anne's saying she is part of a strata.
Yeah, so we are including strata. So dependent on the area, we'll be contacting the strata directly and giving them information, and they'll likely decide if they want to have like the units assessed or not. There were some areas where each unit was dropped off material. It just depends on the area and the type of building or unit. But we are including strata units in our assessments.
Okay, thank you. This is from Tyler Rogers, and this is probably to the both of you. There will be inevitable conflicts between enacting Firesmart principles and achieving canopy cover targets, and removal of these edge trees within the 10-meter zone can lead to problems with the stability of trees further back in the stand that were originally protected. Are there any suggestions for managing both of these objectives? And probably Chad or Richard, which either one. Richard, why don't you start?
So one of the things is all of the work done by private residents when they have to come to us for a wildfire development permit, and they're looking to maintain, say, this 10-meter defensible space, and they're talking about removing certain trees. Because of our history of tree retention, protection, the fact that we have very experienced arborists on staff, edge retention, wind throw assessment is all part of our standard and routine review. So like I said, we will not sign off on a prescription in which the qualified arborist and the forester have not addressed wind throw and edge assessment kind of work and proposals. So it's a very good question, and the person posing the question is right. If you do not look at this kind of edge treatment and all of that, it can have effects and blow down. So quite often what happens is we'll require this homeowner to go into our adjacent lands and affect some canopy thinning and pruning to lower wind sail effect and things like that, to reduce the effects of wind throw and ancillary impacts. So it is something we look at, and we do that on all of our projects.
Okay, great. Chad, did you have anything to add at all, or in the interest of?
No, that was good. And Richard's right. But one thing too is within Coquitlam and Port Coquitlam right now, residents, we can't go into, say, Monday Park or High Creek Park and affect any of the trees and growth in there. So that's stuff that our city and environmental coordinators look at and manage. But there's still steps that we can take around our home to stop that spread. So it doesn't, steps that we can take individually, the forest is going to be the forest, but there's stuff we can do around our home and our property to kind of prevent anything and reduce that hazard.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I know there's just one more comment here, but I don't know, in the interest of time, Susan, I don't want to, it was just having Richard restate something emphatically. Kathleen is asking if Richard could please restate the importance of mature conifers and biodiversity with native species for understory for mitigating effects of climate change, including wildfire prevention.
So our fire department, ourselves, and we firmly believe that a healthy primordial West Coast forest, i.e. healthy, mature fir, cedar, and some of these other important species with rich, healthy understory, is a fire resistive type of environment. And the reason, as I mentioned earlier, it's all about moisture in the soil. So if you looked at some of those pictures that I showed pre-treatment, the one thing you're going to see is all kinds of fuel on the floor. You got needles and sticks and branches and things like that. And then in the heat of the summer, that material dries out and it becomes a fuel risk, right? So if we can remove that barren ground floor in these forests and replace it with rich understory that is going to continue to develop organic rich soil layers, which all hold moisture, that's how we get our fire resistivity into these areas, right? We're not so concerned, yes, there will be tree removal around these interface areas when it warrants, but the sort of the closing point that I kind of want to make here is our fire departments are so good at responding to structure fires within the urban areas. We've got hydrants, we've got equipment, we've got all of this. What our climate adaptation and other studies have shown, our infrastructure is at serious risk if there's a fire in our forest. And that's a lot of things that we're not really paying attention to. We tend to only look at these interface areas. But what we're really concerned about now, especially facing climate change and moth forest impacts and things like that, we've got large areas of forest now that look just like that. They're very unhealthy. They have no understory growing. So we're now looking at plans on how we might go in and treat these areas, right? So Captain Evans talked about the importance of education and recreational land use management. These are tools going forward that are going to be critical to local governments to prevent fires from starting in these sort of urban wildland areas. We got to manage our trails, forests, and educate our people much better than we are doing to prevent those fires from starting.
Okay, thank you, Richard. And thank you, Chad and Tamara. Appreciate it very much. Great questions and great answers.
Thank you very much, Kristen, for hosting, and for our panelists for answering all those questions. This brings us to the end of our Q&A session. For those of you that have questions that were not answered, we will do our best to have them answered by email. I will now pass it over to our Roundtables coordinator, Sherry Dubowitz, to introduce our community input poll.
Thank you so much, Councillor McCura, and thank you to our guest speakers, Richard Boase and Captain Evans. That was amazing. I think our presenters have done an excellent job highlighting how management practices are evolving with the changing climate and with our knowledge, but so must also our behaviors. So as part of our community roundtable, you can help affect change by telling us how you think we should focus our activities in the coming months. Should we focus on a natural space strategy or a development program that encourages green infrastructure? Or what about stormwater management programs which promote better absorption of rainwater into the ground? Or an invasive species program that would ban the sale of invasive species, which can overtake our natural and very important understory, as we learned today. So as a part of its watershed plan, the Roundtable developed a list of strategies to help address the top pressures in the watershed, many of which can help manage our urban forests to help reduce the risk of wildfire. With that in mind, the Roundtable would now like your guidance on how to focus our activities. In a moment, we'll place a link to a poll in the chat asking you to prioritize the top strategies for the coming months. Additionally, this link will be sent out in a follow-up email, which we hope you'll share with those who are unable to attend today. The poll will remain open for the next 2 weeks. Your participation is key to the Roundtable's success, and we thank you for taking the time to have your say. So with that, I will pop that link into the chat, and I will pass it back over to you, Councillor McCura.
Thank you, Sherry. This brings us to the end of our event. A big thank you to our panelists, event planners, and all of you for attending. A recording of the event will be available in the coming days on the Roundtable's social media pages and website. Please remember to like and share with your networks. Before we leave, we wanted to share an upcoming event for the Roundtable. A demonstration rain garden will be installed in Lions Park, Port Coquitlam in mid-October. Volunteers are needed for excavation, planting, and mulching. Scott Wamsley and Clarissa Hoffman are city staff leads on the project. All ages and abilities are welcome. If you're interested in participating in this COVID-safe event, please contact our coordinator at coquitlamwatershed.ca. We have also shared a link to excellent additional resources if you would like to learn more about urban forest management practices and how to reduce the risk of fires around your home. For anyone who missed the pre-show entertainment, there will be an encore showing in a few minutes, so stay connected if you are interested. And thank you again for coming, and have a wonderful day.
Coquitlam is an incredibly interesting place. When most people first arrive, they see our bustling suburbs, people commuting to and from the city. They glance at our standardized homes, towering apartment buildings. But as we've covered in recent Hidden Gems episodes, Coquitlam's a lot more than that. It's home to a variety of incredible plant life, located right beside a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. Its fjords created thanks to the massive glaciers that carved out its winding valleys and glacial lakes. Its mountains, forged in granodiorite. You know, that's the same mineral that makes up the pillars of the Pantheon and the Rosetta Stone. It's been used by indigenous peoples all over the world for thousands of years. This is a place unlike any other. Its waters are so fresh that to this day, they provide fresh drinking water for the entire Metro Vancouver region. Coquitlam actually means red fish up the river. And thanks to species restoration efforts, once again, its rivers provide a place for the red fish to run out to sea. Located just behind the city of Coquitlam, however, is the Coquitlam Ranges, some of the most inaccessible mountains in all of British Columbia. In order to see them, you must either complete a 30-kilometer hike or use a helicopter. They are inaccessible primarily because they provide the drinking water for the surrounding region. However, there are 2 provincial parks in which you can hike deep into to get a cool view of the range, both of which are incredibly dangerous endeavors. In 2021, the very mountain we show you in this video had a major rock slide, blocking off access to one of its main trails. And throughout the last 50 years, countless numbers of people have been injured or gone missing attempting to access these majestic peaks. But if you are an experienced hiker and you take the proper precautions, accessing them is doable.
Can't go over there, but over here, we're in a provincial park.
They mark the beginning of the river that feeds our watershed. And they're home to forests of yellow cedar, towering Douglas firs, old-growth hemlock, and even mountain hemlock. Traditionally, this land is known as Serpent's Land by the Tsleil-Waututh. It's called this because for a very, very long time, you could see a lot of serpents down by the shores. However, throughout the 20th century, it got a bit of a different name. It became known as Mount Beautiful. Its summit lies at 1,260 meters, roughly the same altitude that athletes will train at. There's an old story told by Chief Joe Capilano, published in 1911 by Pauline Johnston during the Great Flood. And still the sea crept up and up at the crest of the bluffs around Lake Beautiful, or Bunsen Lake. The doomed tribes grounded. Not a single person attempted to enter the canoe. There was no wailing, no crying out for safety. Let the children, the young mothers, and the bravest of our young men live, was all the farewell those in the canoe heard as the waters reached the summit. The canoe floated. The last to be seen was the tops of the tallest trees. And then all was a world of water. This flood has been described by many other nations, and it's been told as far south as Washington State. Whatever happened here hundreds of thousands of years ago, it was a disaster, which today we'll only understand through stories. This mountain range is incredible, and I had to show it to you.
So right now we are outside of the Coquitlam water pump station, and our plan today is to head to the very top of Ridge Park. And it is where a lot of the streams, such as the Hoy Creek, start as they're fed down the side of the hill into the city of Coquitlam. So bear with us, we're going on of an adventure. We're just entering the beginning of Ridge Park right now. You can see from this map, it's actually quite interesting. They illustrate all of the different forks of the Hoy Creek, but basically, if you remember from a previous Hidden Gems episode that we shot up here in the North Hoy Creek, this is where the majority of the Hoy Creek starts. And then basically what happens is, as it comes down the mountain and into downtown Coquitlam, it splits off into 3 separate forks all around Ridge Park here. One of those is the North Fork, another one is the West Hoy Creek Fork, and the main Hoy Creek Fork, which jumps and flows right on the other side to the west of us. So this is going to be interesting. I'm excited. This is a beautiful park. Let's get right into it. One interesting fact about Ridge Park here is, as the glacier was carving out Eagle Ridge 12,000 years ago, it sort of cut around what we now know as Ridge Park. Mainly, we know this because there's a lack of glacial sediment here. Not like other parts of the mountain, which are quite sandy. If you go into the Coquitlam Valley, you can see great examples of this. Ridge Park here is mostly straight up granite. So like we were talking about earlier, this is a great example of some of the geology within our watershed. This is just a massive piece of igneous rock that is slowly growing with moss over time.
I have kind of I grew up in Coquitlam as a teenager, so I was a farm boy in Chilliwack Cave, moved to Coquitlam, and my neighbor, I got into fishing, angling, and they used to take me down to the Coquitlam River, and we used to try and fish for jack, chinook, and trout, suckers, whatever we could catch. Didn't do very well, but hey, we tried. But you know, that was my first 1960s, late 1960s and the 70s. You know, so I have a long history with the Coquitlam River. Yep. Well, I think these were historic side channels going back to the pre-damming. So the river floodplain would have spread out all over the area of the valley bottom. And typically juvenile fish and certain species of salmon like to spawn in side channels. Okay, slower flows, lots of gravel, nice riffles, lots of invertebrate production, lots of oxygen, so the riffle oxygenates the water. So chum salmon in particular where there's groundwater, they love it. Coho salmon, those are the two species of the 5 species of Pacific salmon that we have in the Coquitlam River. Those 2 species are the most dominant in the side channels. And juvenile and coho love it because they have a life history of mostly a year, but sometimes 2 years rearing fresh water. So we have done, as BCIT, Fish Wildlife Recreation Program, a lot of in-stream population estimates, and so we've caught fish. And so what we do then is do this marker capture and estimate these very serious ponds that DFO constructed. This would have been about 15, 20 years ago. Again, I don't think I was really part of that, but I've been part of the inventory and assessment for quite a few years since that. So invertebrates love it, particularly groundwater. The temperatures are stable, sometimes the flows are stable. For these ponds, DFO put some pipes through the banks to increase the flows into these historic channels, dug a few deep holes for fish to hold in. And so they're often, the main stem river is really fast and swift, so big species like chinook and steelhead, for some reason pink salmon like main stem gravel. So those 3 species really like the main river, but these off-channel, smaller little breakout water channels are really important for chum production, which don't rear for very long, although they do rear sometimes a little bit. And then they go out to sea right after they come out of the gravel. And then juvenile coho rear, pretty high densities. And I sent you a few reports you can take a look at. And so really valuable for those 2 species. And there's other species, non-game species. So sticklebacks, a lot of sticklebacks, some peamouth chub, probably some northern pipe minnows, red-side shiners, And we've got lamprey, we've got crayfish, perhaps the odd Dolly Varden or bull trout, maybe. The odd steelhead, cutthroat trout. We've steelhead, cutthroat trout. We know cutthroat more than steelhead. I think steelhead juveniles like to rear in the main channel. Really don't know if adult steelhead rear in it, but we haven't seen any evidence of, or sorry, spawn in it. But we have seen evidence, particularly in the riffly areas where steelhead. Riffly areas is more steelhead habitat. Cutthroat seems to like pools, and so coho and cutthroat sort of mix in there.
Wow.
Yep. And there's beaver,
Right.
and there's mallards, and there's kingfishers. There's bear wander around trying to eat the adult salmon, and the city of Coquitlam has to put up signs, beware of bear, and dogs and people, and it's a very rich human plant life, fish life, aquatic algal communities, all that kind of stuff. So it's I don't know how to really describe it, but it was a happy accident. It was a happy little thing that happened because few people had really foresight to work on it. And somebody said, "Oh, let's put some trails in there." So put a little. I'm not particularly a fan of the trails because I think people kind of beat up the riparian area, the vegetation, but it gets them out there, and people are always, when we do our minnow trapping, they always ask us, and it's just one of those things where there's this, we give and take a little bit, but it was a happy accident that it turned out just so positively and so well.
Right now, we're standing at the Oxbow side channel of the Coquitlam River. The Oxbow side channel is over here, and the Coquitlam River is over here.
Okay, we're talking about the Coquitlam River watershed, and the Coquitlam River has had a long history of basically damage through human anthropogenic effects. Probably, well, it depends on the exact nature of the or amplitude of the effects. Logging, so land clearing would have been one of the first ones, but also a dam went up in the early part of the 20th century. This was water supply for New Westminster, a small head dam, and it sort of was probably an obstacle to fish getting up into Coquitlam Lake. So the sockeye that were so precious to the First Nations, Coquitlam apparently means redfish going up the river, and sockeye must have been big numbers. When I was a kid, there were still the old fishing stands, the dip net stands in the lower river down by the Essendale, the Institute, Riverside. And so those stands probably long gone. They brought it away, but they were there. And so the First Nations communities used to dip fish. As land clearing took place, so a lot of the sediment would come in and probably destroy reds. And so the modern day issues are mostly development of landscapes. So water inputs off of the landscape's really important, natural hydrographs. And so what you end up having is you have more roads, more shopping malls, more hard rooftops, water that comes down as rain rather than sinking through the forest and into the ground and slowly seeping into the river, comes down in a great big flash, goes onto pavement, goes into storm drain sewers and swishes into the river. Bad news, you change the flow regime. And then we have non-point source solutions. So putting fertilizers on your lawn, putting pesticides on your lawn, gardening, all brake fluid, dust from your tires, big issue with coho down in the Puget Sound area. Tires, little bits of rubber going in, very bad for coho in particular. So we have these issues.